Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
It's great to be here.
This time, we're diving into something that I know I saw in the headlines, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners did too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And it's a little bit unsettling because it's something that a lot of people, I'm sure, have eaten.
Yeah.
We're talking about the E. coli outbreak that's been linked to McDonald's Quarter Pounders.
Ugh, yeah. It's one of those things where you see it and you think like, "Oh, wow, that's a little too close to home for comfort," you know?
Yeah, I mean, the CDC is even calling this a fast-moving outbreak.
Right.
Um, and they're saying that it's likely bigger than what's currently being reported.
Which is always a little scary to hear.
Yeah, so right now there are 49 confirmed cases across 10 states.
Wow.
And some people are getting really sick. Some people have even, unfortunately, passed away.
Yeah, it's a serious situation for sure.
So we're gonna break down what we know so far, what you need to watch out for, and just kind of what this means for, the future of burgers, really.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating about this outbreak is that it really highlights just how complicated our food system is, you know?
Yeah.
Think about it. A single ingredient can have the potential to affect people all over the country.
Absolutely.
And in this case, it seems like it might be something as simple as, those slivered onions they use on the quarter pounders.
Yeah.
It's kind of
It
mind-boggling.
really makes you think twice before you just grab something, quick
Yeah.
and easy.
Yeah.
So let's unpack what the CDC has found so far.
All right, so the CDC has been tracking illnesses that started popping up between September 27th and October 11th.
Okay.
And while they're still investigating and trying to figure out all the specifics,
Right.
they've managed to narrow it down to either the quarter pounder beef patties themselves or those onions as the possible culprit.
So how do they go about, figuring that out?
Well, they interviewed almost everyone who got sick, and almost all of them specifically remembered eating a quarter pounder before they started experiencing symptoms.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big clue right there.
Yeah.
Plus, those quarter pound patties are only used in quarter pounders.
Right.
And those slivered onions are mainly used on quarter pounders too.
Right.
So it's like a process of elimination, but the stakes are definitely a lot higher than just figuring out, who ate the last cookie.
Right. And like you said, they're still investigating. But what's even more worrying is that the CDC is saying that those 49 cases are probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They're saying that, there's probably a lot more people who maybe had milder symptoms and didn't even go to the doctor,
Right.
or whose cases just haven't been linked to the outbreak yet.
Exactly, and that's what makes these outbreaks so tricky to track. There's
Right.
always this element of the unknown, and that's why they're saying it's likely bigger than what's being reported.
Right. And then to add to that, the culprit this time is E. coli 0157.87,
Right.
which is a particularly nasty strain of E. coli that can cause some pretty serious complications.
Yeah, it's not your average everyday E. coli.
Right.
Most types of E. coli are actually harmless. They live in our gut and they help us digest food.
Right.
But this particular strain produces something called Shiga toxin,
Right, yeah.
or STEC, and that's where the trouble really begins.
So this Shiga toxin, why is it so bad?
Well, essentially, it acts like a tiny wrecking ball inside your intestines. It damages the lining, which can lead to bloody diarrhea, and in some cases, it can even trigger something called hemolytic uremic syndrome, or HUS,
Wow.
which can lead to kidney failure. And unfortunately, we already know that one child in this outbreak has developed HUS.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just HUS. We also know that an older person in Colorado passed away from complications related to this outbreak.
Right. It's a really scary reminder of how serious this can all be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to forget sometimes that food can actually be dangerous, but outbreaks like this really bring it home.
Right. It makes you think back to other outbreaks, like the one with Jack in the Box back in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That was another massive E. coli outbreak linked to their burgers.
Right.
And tragically, 4 children lost their lives in that one.
Yeah, it was a terrible tragedy, and it really changed the way we think about food safety in this country.
You're right. That outbreak led to a lot of changes in how we handle food and the regulations surrounding it.
Yeah, it really forced the industry and regulators to take a hard look at the food supply chain and try to find ways to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening again.
So the situation with McDonald's, as scary as it is,
Yeah.
hopefully will lead to even better food safety practices in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a silver lining we can hope for.
But it does make you wonder, how do they assure people that it's safe to eat their burgers again,
Right, that's a big question.
once this is all over?
Well, so far, McDonald's has acknowledged the outbreak, and they've temporarily stopped selling Quarter Pounders in the areas that have been affected.
Okay.
They've also paused the distribution of those slivered onions, and they've put out a statement emphasizing their commitment to food safety.
Okay.
They're saying that they hope to bring back Quarter Pounders in the coming weeks.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting to see how they go about rebuilding trust with their customers after this.
Yeah, it's one thing to, fix the immediate problem.
Right.
But then how do you make people feel confident about coming back and eating there again?
It's a big challenge for sure.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up a bigger question about how we balance, our desire for convenience foods with the need for really strong safety measures in this huge and complicated system that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a balancing act.
And it's not just about McDonald's, it's a question for the whole industry,
For sure.
Like I never really thought about how every single ingredient in my burger has its own whole journey
It's a journey.
from the farm to my plate.
Right.
And making sure that each step of that journey is safe
Yes.
is a huge task.
It really is.
And we crave the speed and the ease of, fast food.
Sure.
But this is a reminder that there are real risks involved.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's easy to take it for granted, but our food supply is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And it's vulnerable in a lot of ways.
Right. And it makes you wonder, how do we stay informed and take precautions
Yeah.
without being completely terrified to eat anything?
Right. It's about finding that balance.
Right. And how can we use things like technology and stricter regulations to prevent these kinds of outbreaks in the future?
Those are the big questions we need to be asking ourselves.
Exactly.
Moving forward.
But first, I think we should talk about what people can do right now to stay safe.
Absolutely. Let's get into that.
Yeah.
It's easy to get overwhelmed with all this information about an outbreak,
I
but,
know.
you have a role to play in your own safety. It's
Right.
not about being scared of burgers forever.
Right.
It's about being aware and taking precautions.
So what can our listener do right now,
Yeah.
especially with, this outbreak still unfolding? What are some of the red flags that should send someone, straight to the doctor?
Okay, so first and foremost, if you've had a McDonald's Quarter Pounder recently
Yeah.
and you start experiencing severe symptoms,
Okay.
like bloody diarrhea, a high fever over 102 degrees,
Okay.
diarrhea that's lasted more than 3 days and isn't getting better,
Mm,
or vomiting so much that you can't keep any liquids down, don't hesitate. Call your doctor immediately.
those are some pretty clear warning signs.
Yeah.
But what if you're not sure?
Yeah.
Is it better to err on the side of caution and call the doctor even with milder symptoms?
Absolutely, especially if you're in a higher risk group like young children, older adults, or people with weakened immune systems.
Right.
It's always best to check with your doctor just to be safe.
That makes sense now, beyond this particular outbreak.
Yeah.
Are there any general food safety tips we should all be aware of?
Oh, yeah.
Especially when it comes to ground meat, like, the beef in those Quarter Pounders?
Oh. Absolutely. So ground meat has a larger surface area, which makes it more vulnerable to contamination.
Okay.
When you grind meat, you're essentially mixing the surface bacteria throughout the whole batch.
Right.
So let's start with the basics.
Mm.
Always wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water
Yeah.
before and after handling raw meat.
Okay.
And don't forget to wash any surfaces, utensils, or cutting boards that touch the raw meat
Right.
to prevent cross-contamination.
So it's all about creating like a clean, dedicated space for handling that raw meat.
Exactly. It's like establishing a raw meat zone in your kitchen.
I like that.
Keep it separate and contained.
Yeah.
And when it comes to cooking, don't just rely on how the meat looks to
Right.
determine if it's cooked through.
Okay.
Use a food thermometer.
Yeah.
Make sure that ground meat reaches an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's the magic number.
That's the magic number to zap those harmful bacteria.
I'll admit I'm guilty of kind of eyeballing it sometimes.
Yeah,
But you're right. A thermometer takes out the guesswork.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Another key point is to prevent cross-contamination during cooking.
Oh.
Use separate plates and utensils for raw and cooked meat.
Okay.
You don't want those culinary swimmers accidentally bumping into each other.
I love that analogy.
Wow.
Separate swimming lanes
Exactly.
for your raw and cooked food.
Now let's talk storage, refrigerate, or freeze ground meat as soon as you get home from the store.
Okay.
And when thawing frozen meat, do it safely in the refrigerator,
Mhm.
under cold running water, or in the microwave.
Okay.
Never thaw it on the counter at room temperature.
Right. So no more leaving that frozen burger out on the counter to thaw all day.
Exactly. It's like setting up a bacterial buffet.
Right. An open invitation for bacteria to have a party.
Exactly.
So all these tips really come down to just being aware and proactive about food safety.
Yeah.
It's not about living in fear.
Yeah.
It's about having the knowledge and taking simple steps
Exactly.
to protect ourselves and our families.
Well said. And, this McDonald's outbreak, as unfortunate as it is,
Right.
serves as a strong reminder that food safety is an ongoing responsibility we all share.
It kind of brings us back to that bigger question we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
How do we balance our love for these convenient foods with the need for, really rigorous safety measures
Right.
in a food system that's become increasingly complex?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
We've gotten so used to having this huge variety of food at our fingertips.
Right. Readily available and often at affordable prices.
Exactly. And it's easy to forget about the intricate web of processes
Yeah.
and people involved in bringing that food to our tables.
Right. And within that web, there are points of vulnerability where contamination can occur.
Absolutely.
Whether it's at the farm, during processing, transportation, or even, during preparation at a restaurant or in our own kitchens.
At any point along the way.
Yeah, it's a chain reaction.
Yeah.
And a break in the chain at any point can have a huge impact.
Exactly. And this McDonald's outbreak, with those slivered onions being the likely culprit,
Yeah.
really highlights how even seemingly small ingredients can become sources of contamination.
It really makes you realize that each ingredient in your burger has its own journey.
Does.
And making sure every step of that journey is safe is a huge responsibility.
It really is. And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
We've seen how devastating these outbreaks can be, not just with this McDonald's situation, but with the Jack in the Box outbreak all those years ago.
Right.
It's a somber reminder that foodborne illnesses are a very real and serious public health concern.
So what can we do? How do we ensure both convenience and safety in our food system?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer. It
Correct.
requires a multifaceted approach that involves government regulations, industry accountability, and consumer awareness.
It's like a three-legged stool.
Exactly.
You need all three legs to be strong
Yes.
and stable for the whole thing to work.
Absolutely. So let's start with government regulations.
Okay.
We need strong, comprehensive food safety regulations that are consistently enforced.
Right.
These regulations should cover everything from how food is grown and handled on the farm,
Right.
to food processing standards, to how often restaurants are inspected.
It's about setting clear expectations.
Yeah.
And holding everyone accountable.
Exactly. And that brings us to the second leg of the stool,
Okay.
industry accountability.
Right.
Food producers, processors, distributors, and retailers all have a responsibility to make food safety a top priority.
Right. It's not just about checking off boxes on a compliance checklist.
No, it's about going above and beyond
Right.
to make sure the food they're putting out into the world is safe.
It's about making food safety a core value,
Exactly.
not just a box to be checked.
Now let's talk about that third leg, consumer awareness.
Okay.
You, the listener, play a crucial role too.
Right.
It's about being informed about food safety practices and making responsible choices.
Things like washing our hands properly, cooking food, thoroughly storing it safely,
Yes.
and just being aware of potential contamination risks.
Absolutely. And it also means staying informed about food recalls and outbreaks.
Okay.
Pay attention to the news. Be aware of food safety alerts, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right.
And advocate for stronger food safety measures.
We're not just passive consumers.
Yeah.
We have a voice and a responsibility.
Exactly.
Make sure that what we're eating is safe.
That brings us back to the core of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the details of this McDonald's outbreak, the potential causes, the risks involved, and the steps being taken to address the situation.
Right.
But it's also prompted us to think more broadly about how complex our food system is
Yeah.
and how we balance convenience with safety.
This is a reminder that food safety is an ongoing conversation,
Absolutely.
a shared responsibility
Yes.
that requires constant attention and collaboration
It does.
from everyone involved, from the farm to our forks.
From farm to fork.
Yeah, it's not a one-time fix.
Bro.
It's something we need to be thinking about and working towards all the time.
All the time. It's easy to get caught up in the worry of an outbreak like this.
Right.
But it's really striking to me, this whole idea of shared responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not just on the government or the food industry.
Right.
We as consumers have a role to play too.
Absolutely.
It takes all of us working together to make sure that our food is both convenient and safe.
Right. And this McDonald's outbreak, as unfortunate as it is, it could be a real chance for change.
Definitely.
Like a wake-up call to reevaluate how things are done and make sure that we're doing everything possible to prevent something like this from happening again.
Exactly. And that starts with asking those tough questions.
Yeah.
Demanding transparency and holding those in charge accountable
Right.
for the safety of our food.
So it's not just about being cautious in our own kitchens.
No.
It's about engaging in these conversations.
Yeah.
Staying informed about outbreaks and recalls.
Yeah.
And advocating for stronger food safety policies on a larger scale.
Absolutely. And it's about making those conscious choices as consumers,
Right.
supporting companies that prioritize food safety,
Yeah.
reading labels carefully, and really taking those extra steps at home to handle food properly.
It's empowering to realize that we're not just passive bystanders in this whole thing.
Right.
We have a role to play in protecting ourselves and our communities.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
there's one more piece of the puzzle I think is worth considering.
Okay.
We've talked about the roles of the government, the food industry, and us as consumers.
Right.
But what about the role of technology?
Oh, that's a great point. Technology is changing so rapidly,
It is.
and it has the potential to completely transform how we approach food safety.
I think so too.
I mean, imagine a world where blockchain technology is used to track every single ingredient in your food,
Right.
from the farm where it was grown
Yeah.
to the moment it lands on your plate.
It's amazing to think about.
Or what about sensors that are constantly monitoring temperatures
Yes.
and can detect contamination in real time?
That would be a game changer.
We could even use AI to analyze massive amounts of data
Right.
and predict potential outbreaks before they even happen.
Absolutely. These technological advancements could really revolutionize how we ensure traceability, transparency,
Yeah.
and ultimately safety in the food supply chain.
Right. It's an exciting frontier.
It is.
And I think we're only just scratching the surface of what's possible.
I agree.
So while this E. coli outbreak is definitely cause for concern,
Yes.
it's also a chance to look ahead and think about how we can use these emerging technologies to create a safer, more resilient food system for everyone.
I completely agree. It's a reminder that even in the face of challenges, there's always hope
Yeah.
and the potential for positive change.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the McDonald's E. coli outbreak.
It was a good one.
We covered a lot of ground today, from the outbreak specifics to the bigger questions about food safety in a complex world.
Absolutely.
But most importantly, we hope you, our listener, are walking away with a better understanding of this issue
Yeah,
and feel empowered to make informed choices for yourself and your family.
for sure.
Stay safe, stay informed, and as always, thanks for joining us on the deep dive today.